My fiancée's parents said I wasn't her level, forced her to cancel the wedding, so I made one move that flipped their entire world without warning. I, 28, male, and my life has been pretty damn good up until recently. My dad, Robert Mitchell, owns Mitchell Construction and Development. Fake names, obviously. One of the biggest general contractors in our metro area. We're talking major commercial projects, shopping centers, office complexes, government contracts. The company pulls in about $40 million a year in revenue. Now, before you roll your eyes and think, oh great, another rich kid story, let me stop you right there. Dad made damn sure I earned everything I got. I started working construction sites when I was 16. Real work, not some cushy office job. Spent my summers hauling materials, learning trades, getting my hands dirty alongside guys who'd been doing this for decades. After college, business management because Dad insisted I understand both sides. I worked my way up through every department, estimating, project management, client relations, you name it. 5 years of proving myself before Dad finally made me VP of operations. I earned my $95,000 salary plus bonuses, and everyone in the company knows I didn't get here because of my last name. Dad always taught me that respect is earned, not inherited, that our family's success came from treating people fairly and delivering quality work. Son, he'd say, reputation is the only thing money can't buy. You can lose everything else and rebuild, but lose your reputation and you're finished. I took that to heart, always have. For the past 4 years, the center of my world was my fiancée, Amanda Clark. God, even thinking about her name makes my jaw clench now. Amanda was perfect, at least I thought so. Beautiful, smart, funny in that way that made every day feel lighter. She worked in marketing for some mid-sized firm, made decent money, seemed to genuinely enjoy spending time with me regardless of what we were doing. We met at a charity fundraiser Dad's company sponsored. She was there with friends. I was there because Dad insisted all family attend these things for community relations. She walked up to me at the bar and said, "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else right now." I laughed and said, "Pretty much anywhere." We ended up talking all night. What I loved about Amanda was that she never seemed impressed by the money. When I told her what my family did, she just nodded and asked if I enjoyed the work. When I picked her up in my truck instead of something flashy, she said she preferred guys who drove practical vehicles. When we went to dinner, she insisted on splitting checks half the time. For 4 years, I thought I'd found someone who loved me for me, not for what my family could provide. I was such an idiot. Amanda's family was a different story entirely. Her father, David Clark, owned Clark Mechanical Systems, a mid-sized HVAC and plumbing contractor. They did good work, had a decent reputation, but they were definitely a tier below the major players in our market. Her mother, Patricia, was one of those women who defined herself entirely by her husband's success and her daughter's potential. Never worked a day in her life, but somehow always had opinions about everyone else's career choices. Always dressed like she was heading to a country club, always talking about standards and expectations. From day one, they treated me weird, not hostile exactly, but like they were constantly evaluating me, asking about my long-term goals and my vision for the future, making comments about Amanda's potential and how important it was for her to be with someone who could provide properly. At the time, I thought they were just being protective parents. Now I realize they were interviewing me for a position I didn't even know I was applying for. About a year ago, things started getting strange with Amanda's family. David would make these casual comments about business being tough, about how the big contractors were squeezing out the smaller players. Patricia would mention their temporary financial adjustments and how they were repositioning for future growth. Amanda started acting different too. More questions about Dad's business, about upcoming projects, about how contracting decisions got made. She'd bring up her father's work more often, mention how skilled his crews were, how reliable his company had always been. I thought she was just proud of her family. Looking back, she was gathering intelligence. The breaking point came 6 months ago when David's company landed in serious trouble. A major project had gone sideways, something about faulty equipment and cost overruns that left them holding the bag for about $300,000 in damages. Their insurance fought the claim, suppliers started demanding cash up front, and suddenly Clark Mechanical was looking at bankruptcy. Amanda was devastated. She came to me crying, talking about how her family might lose everything, how her father had worked for 30 years to build his business and it could all disappear because of one bad project. I felt terrible for her. This was the woman I loved, and her family was in crisis. So I did what any decent fiancé would do. I offered to help. Maybe I could talk to my dad, I suggested. We've got that new retail complex project starting up. It'll need major HVAC work. Maybe we could get your father's company on the bid list. The way Amanda's eyes lit up should have been my first warning sign, not relieved, calculating. You do that? Really? Of course. We're going to be family soon, right? That weekend, I sat down with Dad and laid out the situation. David's company was in trouble, but they did quality work. The new Meridian shopping complex project would need extensive mechanical systems. Maybe we could throw them a lifeline. Dad listened carefully, then asked the questions I should have asked. Son, what's their financial situation really look like? Because if they're struggling with cash flow, taking on a major project could make things worse, not better. I think they just need a break, Dad. One good contract to get back on their feet. Dad studied me for a long moment. This is important to you? It is. All right, have David submit a proposal. If the numbers work and they can handle the scope, we'll consider it. David's proposal came in 2 weeks later. $1.2 million for all HVAC, plumbing, and fire suppression systems for the Meridian complex. The price was competitive, the timeline reasonable, and their crew had the experience to handle it. But Dad's due diligence team found some concerning things. Clark Mechanical was worse off than I'd realized. They owed money to suppliers, had outstanding liens, and their bonding capacity was maxed out. Taking on a project this size was a massive risk for them. Robert, Dad told me, this could either save them or finish them. If they can't perform, or if they default halfway through, it'll cost us time and money to fix. But if they can pull it off, then they're back in business, and we've got a solid subcontractor for future projects. Dad made his decision based on trust in my judgment and his own sense of fairness. He structured the contract with milestone payments and strict quality controls, but he gave David the job. When I told Amanda, she cried with relief. David shook my hand so hard I thought he might break something. Patricia actually hugged me, the first time she'd ever shown any genuine warmth. You saved us, David said. I won't forget this. Ever. For the first time since I'd known them, Amanda's family treated me like I truly belonged. David started calling me son. Patricia stopped making those passive-aggressive comments about my future plans. Their gratitude felt genuine, warm, real. I thought I'd finally proven myself worthy of their daughter. I had no idea I'd just signed my own death warrant. The Meridian project was going well. David's crews were on schedule, quality was good, and the milestone payments were helping them dig out of their financial hole. For 6 months, everything felt perfect. Amanda and I were planning our wedding, her family was treating me like gold, and Dad was impressed with how the partnership was working out. Then came the dinner that changed everything. It was a Thursday night in late September. Amanda and I were at her parents' house for their weekly family dinner, this tradition they'd insisted on once David's business started recovering. We were talking about wedding plans, specifically the budget. Amanda and I had agreed on something reasonable, maybe $50,000 for about 150 guests. Nice, but not extravagant. Her parents had been pushing for something bigger, more elaborate, but we'd held firm on what we could afford. That's when Patricia dropped her bomb. Actually, Robert, we've been thinking. A man in your position, with your family standing in the community, well, $50,000 seems rather modest, doesn't it? I looked up from my plate, confused. What do you mean? Well, you're a Mitchell. Your father's company is one of the most successful in the region. People will be watching, judging. The wedding should reflect that status. David nodded along. What Patricia is trying to say is that this is an opportunity to make a statement, show people what the Mitchell family represents. The Mitchell family? I repeated. This is Amanda's and my wedding. We're paying for it ourselves. That's when Patricia laughed. Not a nice laugh, a condescending, dismissive sound that made my skin crawl. Oh, Robert, don't be so small-minded. You can't possibly expect Amanda to have some budget wedding when she's marrying into one of the most prominent families in the city. Prominent families? I was starting to get annoyed. Patricia, we're contractors, not royalty. David leaned forward, and I could see something cold in his eyes that I'd never noticed before. Robert's son, you need to understand something. Amanda deserves the best. She's been raised with certain expectations, certain standards. A $50,000 wedding sends the wrong message about what kind of life you can provide for her. I looked at Amanda, expecting her to back me up, to remind her parents that we'd already decided on this together. Instead, she was avoiding my eyes, fidgeting with her napkin. Amanda, I said, tell them what we agreed on. She looked up at me then, and what I saw on her face made my blood turn to ice. Not love, not support, calculation. Maybe they have a point, Robert. I mean, we want to start our marriage off right, make a good impression. A good impression on who? Patricia jumped back in. On your father's clients, business partners, everyone who matters in this community. Robert, surely you understand that image is everything in business. Image? I was getting angry now. You want me to spend $100,000 plus on one night to maintain some image? It's not about one night, David said, his voice taking on a patronizing tone. It's about establishing your position, showing people that you're serious about success. That's when I realized what was happening. They weren't talking about the wedding, they were talking about me, about what I represented to them. Let me get this straight, I said slowly. You think I should spend twice what Amanda and I agreed on because of what other people might think? Patricia's mask slipped a little. Robert, Amanda has been patient with you. She's accepted your practical approach to things, but she deserves better than practical. She deserves exceptional, the kind of life her breeding and intelligence entitle her to. Patricia continued, the kind of life she could have with someone who truly understands what she's worth. The room went dead silent. David was nodding along with his wife's words. Amanda was still staring at her plate. Then Patricia delivered the kill shot. You're a good boy, Robert. You've been very helpful to our family. But let's be honest here. You're not really Amanda's equal, are you? She needs someone who can match her sophistication, her social standing, someone who won't hold her back from reaching her full potential. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Hold her back? David jumped in. What Patricia means is that Amanda has options, son. She's beautiful, educated, comes from good family. She could marry anyone she wants. A doctor, a lawyer, someone who runs their own business instead of just working for daddy. Working for daddy. There it was. I looked at Amanda one more time, silently begging her to say something, anything to defend me or us, or what we'd built together. Instead, she finally looked up and said, quiet but firm, "They're right, Robert. I've been thinking about this for a while now. I don't think we want the same things anymore. I think we should call off the wedding." Just like that, 4 years together, and she ended it because her parents decided I wasn't good enough for their precious daughter. I didn't yell, didn't argue, didn't beg. I just sat there for a moment, processing the fact that the woman I'd planned to marry had just discarded me like a broken appliance. Then I did something that surprised all of us, including myself. I smiled. "I understand," I said, pulling the engagement ring off Amanda's finger and setting it gently on the table. "Thank you for being honest about how you really feel." I stood up, looked each of them in the eye, and said, "You know what? You're absolutely right. Amanda does deserve someone who can match her sophistication and social standing. I hope she finds him." Then I walked out, got in my truck, and drove home. But I wasn't upset. I was something much more dangerous. I was calm. I sat in my driveway for 20 minutes, engine off, just thinking, not about Amanda, that was over and done. I was thinking about the contract, the $1.2 million lifeline my family had thrown to David's company when they were drowning, the contract that had saved their business, restored their lifestyle, and apparently convinced them they were too good for the family that had rescued them. I pulled out my phone and called Dad. "Robert? Everything all right, son? It's pretty late. Dad, I need to talk to you about the Clark Mechanical contract." There was a pause. "What about it?" "Amanda and I just broke up. Her family made it very clear that I'm not good enough for their daughter. Apparently, I'm just some guy who works for his daddy and could never provide the kind of life Amanda deserves." Another pause, longer this time. When Dad spoke again, his voice was ice cold. "Is that so?" "Yeah. They seem to think Amanda had better options. More sophisticated options. Someone who wouldn't hold her back from reaching her full potential. And how do you feel about that, son? I feel like maybe we should reconsider our business relationships. After all, if I'm not good enough to marry into their family, maybe Mitchell Construction isn't good enough to work with either." Dad was quiet for a long moment. "Then, Robert, that contract has a termination clause. We can cancel for convenience with 30 days notice and a 10% penalty fee." I remember. The penalty would be about $120,000. David's already been paid for completed work, so we wouldn't be cheating him, but canceling would put his company in a very difficult position. How difficult? Well, they've hired additional crews for this project, leased new equipment, taken out loans based on the contract value. If we cancel, they'd be overextended with no major projects to cover their new overhead. I thought about Patricia's condescending laugh, about David calling me son while secretly thinking I wasn't worthy of his daughter, about Amanda sitting there nodding along while her parents dismantled 4 years of my life. Dad, what would happen to Clark Mechanical if we canceled? Honestly, they'd probably go under within 6 months. The penalty fee wouldn't be enough to cover their new commitments. And Mitchell Construction? We'd take a hit on the penalty and have to find a new mechanical contractor, but we'd be fine. Might even save money in the long run if we can get better rates elsewhere. I made my decision. "Dad, I want you to cancel the contract." "You sure about that, son? That's a lot of people's livelihoods we're talking about." "I'm sure. They made their position very clear tonight. If I'm not good enough for their family, then our company's money isn't good enough for their business." "All right, Robert. I'll have legal draft the termination notice first thing in the morning. It'll be delivered by close of business tomorrow." "Thanks, Dad." "Son, for what it's worth, I think you're making the right choice. Family loyalty goes both ways. If they can't see your worth, they don't deserve our support." I hung up and went inside, slept like a baby for the first time in months. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 23 text messages. The fun was just beginning. The first wave of calls started around 10 a.m., right after the termination notice was delivered. David called first, confused and panicked, then Patricia, then Amanda, all asking if there had been some mistake, some misunderstanding. I let them all go to voicemail. I had work to do. See, canceling the contract was just the opening move. I'd been thinking all night about how to really twist the knife, and I'd remembered something important. 3 months ago, Amanda had asked me to help her friend Sarah get a job at Dad's company. Sarah worked in accounting, and we'd been looking for someone to help with project billing. Sarah was smart, detail-oriented, and grateful for the opportunity. We'd become friendly over the months. Nothing romantic, just workplace friendship. But Sarah had access to all of Mitchell Construction's financial records, including details about our subcontractors. So I asked Sarah to do me a favor. I wanted to see all of Clark Mechanical's payment records, work history, and performance evaluations. Officially, it was for a routine partnership review. Unofficially, I was looking for ammunition. What Sarah found was pure gold. Clark Mechanical hadn't just been struggling financially, they'd been cutting corners to keep their bids competitive. Cheaper materials, fewer quality control checks, rushing installations to save on labor costs. Nothing that would cause immediate failure, but stuff that would lead to problems down the road. More importantly, David had been padding his invoices, not by huge amounts, just enough to not raise red flags, a few extra hours here, some inflated material costs there. Over the course of the project, he'd probably skimmed an extra $50,000 from Mitchell Construction. But the real bombshell came when Sarah dug deeper into the timeline of Clark Mechanical's recent jobs, and that's when we discovered something that made my blood boil. David's company hadn't gotten into financial trouble because of one bad project. They'd gotten into trouble because David had been systematically overbilling clients for years and finally got caught by a major client who demanded an audit. The client? Hutchinson Development, one of Mitchell Construction's biggest competitors. The pieces started falling into place. David's financial crisis wasn't bad luck. It was the result of years of fraudulent billing finally catching up to him. And when Hutchinson Development found out they'd been defrauded, they'd not only sued for damages but also made sure word got around the industry about Clark Mechanical's practices. That's why no other major contractors would work with David. It wasn't because the market was tough. It was because he had a reputation for cheating clients. But here's the really sick part. Sarah found emails between David and Amanda dating back over a year, discussing Mitchell Construction as a potential opportunity and strategizing about how to leverage the relationship to secure work. Amanda hadn't fallen in love with me, and then her family got into trouble. Amanda had been cultivating our relationship specifically to position herself to help her father's failing business. I'd been played from day one. The emails were damning. Amanda asking about Dad's upcoming projects, about his decision-making process, about which employees had influence. Over contracting decisions, David coaching her on what information to gather and how to bring up her father's company in casual conversation. But the worst email was from just 2 weeks ago. Amanda writing to her father, "Robert's completely wrapped around my finger. After we get married and I have real influence in the Mitchell family, we can position Clark Mechanical as their exclusive mechanical contractor. Multi-year deals, premium rates, the works. This investment in the relationship will pay off for decades." Investment in the relationship. That's all I'd ever been to her. But wait, it gets worse. Sarah found one more thing that made everything click into place. Clark Mechanical had received a cash infusion 3 months ago, right around the time Amanda started talking about marriage timelines and pressing for a wedding date. The money came from Patricia's brother, Marcus Webb, and Marcus Webb was a partner at Webb Richardson and Associates, the law firm that represented Hutchinson Development in their lawsuit against Clark Mechanical. I stared at the documents for a long time, putting together the final pieces of the puzzle. David had been stealing from clients for years. When Hutchinson Development caught him, they sued and spread word about his practices, blacklisting him from working with major contractors. David was facing bankruptcy and probably criminal charges. That's when Patricia's family stepped in with a plan. Use Amanda to hook a Mitchell, secure a major contract to stabilize the business, then use the marriage to position Clark Mechanical as Mitchell Construction's preferred contractor going forward. Amanda's relationship with me wasn't love, it was a multi-year business development strategy. And now that they had the contract and thought they were stable, they were cutting me loose because I was no longer useful. They probably figured I'd be too devastated to cause problems, and they could ride out the contract cancellation penalty while looking for their next mark. They had seriously underestimated who they were dealing with. Armed with Sarah's research, I decided it was time to have some fun. But first, I needed to let Amanda know exactly how screwed she was. I called her around 2 p.m., right after I'd finished putting together my evidence file. Robert, thank God you called. We need to talk about this contract situation. There's been some kind of misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, Amanda. I canceled the contract because your family made it clear I'm not good enough for you. Seems pretty straightforward. Robert, please. My parents were just stressed about the wedding costs. They didn't mean... Actually, Amanda, I think they meant exactly what they said. Just like you meant what you said when you decided to call off our engagement. We can fix this, or we can get back together, work things out. Interesting timing on that offer. Almost like it has something to do with the contract cancellation. Silence. Amanda, I've been doing some research today. Very interesting reading. What kind of research? Well, for starters, I found out about your father's little billing fraud problem with Hutchinson Development, and the lawsuit, and the reason no other major contractors will work with Clark Mechanical. More silence. I also found some fascinating emails between you and your father. Emails about leveraging our relationship and positioning your family as our exclusive contractor after we got married. I could hear her breathing getting shaky. Robert, I can explain. Can you explain the cash infusion from Uncle Marcus? The one that came right around the time you started pushing for a wedding date. How do you know about that? Amanda, my family's company has access to financial records for all our contractors. Due diligence, you know. And when I started digging, I found some very interesting patterns. Robert, please. You don't understand the whole situation. I understand perfectly. Your father's been stealing from clients for years. When he finally got caught, your family cooked up a plan to use me as your financial lifeline. 4 years of my life, Amanda. 4 years of thinking you loved me, when really I was just a mark in your family's long con. She started crying then, but I wasn't done. But here's the really beautiful part, Amanda. Canceling our contract isn't just going to put your father's business under, it's going to trigger a full audit of Clark Mechanical's billing practices. Because when a major contractor suddenly terminates a relationship, other clients start asking questions. What do you mean? I mean, I've already made some calls, shared some information about your father's creative billing methods with a few industry contacts. Word travels fast in our business. Robert, you can't do this. My family will lose everything. Your family tried to steal everything from my family. The only difference is we're better at it than you are. I hung up and immediately called my insurance agent, because if Clark Mechanical was about to implode, I wanted to make sure Mitchell Construction was protected from any legal fallout. The next few days were beautiful to watch. Word started spreading through the industry about Clark Mechanical's problems. Other clients began reviewing their billing, finding discrepancies, demanding explanations. The state licensing board opened an investigation. The IRS started asking questions about unreported income. David's bonding company pulled his license. By the end of the week, Clark Mechanical was finished. Not just the current contract, the entire business was done. But I wasn't satisfied yet, because Patricia and Amanda still thought they could smooth talk their way out of this. They kept calling, leaving messages about working things out and finding a solution that benefits everyone. Time to show them exactly what I thought of their solutions. The begging started in earnest about 2 weeks after the contract cancellation. First, David showed up at my office, looking like he'd aged 10 years. Security had to escort him out when he started making a scene in our lobby. Then Patricia called, trying to play the family card, talking about how much they'd grown to love me, how I was like a son to them, how surely we could work past this misunderstanding. But the call that really made my day was from Amanda herself, 3 weeks after everything went down. Robert, I need to see you. Please, just give me 5 minutes to explain. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her for coffee. I was curious to see what her final play would be. She looked terrible, hair unwashed, clothes wrinkled, dark circles under her eyes. This wasn't the polished princess who dumped me for not being good enough. Robert, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never meant for things to go this far. Which things, Amanda? The 4-year con job or getting caught? It wasn't a con job. I really did love you. I still do. You loved what I could provide. There's a difference. She started crying again. My family is destroyed, Robert. My father's facing criminal charges. My mother's having a breakdown. We're going to lose our house. That's unfortunate. How can you be so cold? This is my family. Amanda, 3 weeks ago, your family told me I wasn't good enough to be part of it. You agreed with them. So why would I care what happens to them now? Because somewhere inside, you're still the good man I fell in love with. I almost laughed. The good man you were planning to use as your family's personal ATM for the next 30 years? That wasn't the plan. It was exactly the plan. I've seen the emails, Amanda. I know about the uncle's money, the Hutchinson lawsuit, all of it. She stared at me, finally realizing how completely exposed they were. What do you want, Robert? What will it take to make this stop? Nothing. Nothing, Amanda. You can't give me anything I want, because what I want is 4 years of my life back. I want to unmeet your family. I want to never have fallen for your act in the first place. Robert, please, I'll do anything. We can get back together. I'll sign a prenup, give up any claim to your family's money, just help us. And that's when I delivered the line I'd been rehearsing for weeks. Amanda, you told me I'd never be good enough for you. Well, congratulations, you were right. I'm not good enough to be the sucker who bails out your criminal family. I'm not good enough to pretend your love was ever real. And I'm definitely not good enough to waste any more of my life on people who see me as nothing but a paycheck. I rose from my seat, preparing to depart, but paused and pivoted back toward her once more, delivering my parting words with a deliberate edge. By the way, I said calmly, I've heard that Hutchinson Development is currently hiring new staff. Perhaps your father should consider submitting an application there. I'm absolutely certain they would be thrilled to bring on board someone with his particular background and extensive experience in the field. That encounter took place a full 6 months ago, marking a significant turning point in the unfolding saga. In the aftermath, David found himself sentenced to 18 long months behind bars in a federal prison, convicted on serious charges of mail fraud and tax evasion that stemmed from his questionable business practices. Patricia, facing the harsh realities of their crumbling finances, was forced to put their once-beloved family home on the market and relocate to a modest rental apartment, a far cry from the luxurious life she had known. These days, she earns her living by working at a local department store, where she interacts daily with the very types of ordinary customers she had previously regarded with disdain and superiority from her elevated social perch. As for Amanda, she ended up returning to live under her mother's roof after being let go from her position in marketing, a role she had held with some pride. It appears that having a father who is now a convicted felon significantly diminishes one's appeal in the eyes of potential employers, creating unforeseen barriers in the job market. The last update I received about her situation indicated that she had taken a job at a bustling call center, scraping by on a meager wage of approximately $12 per hour, a stark contrast to her former aspirations. As for me, I'm doing great. Dad made me senior VP after seeing how I handled the Clark situation. He said it showed real business instincts and family loyalty. My salary is up to $120,000 plus bonuses. I've been dating someone new for a few months, Jessica, a veterinarian I met through friends. She's smart, funny, and most importantly, she makes her own money and doesn't give a damn about mine. When I told her the whole story about Amanda's family, she just shook her head and said, "Sounds like you dodged a bullet." The best part, last month Amanda called one more time. Not my personal phone. She tried calling the office, claiming it was about settling final business matters. My secretary put her through. "Robert, I need help. I can't make rent this month, and I don't know where else to turn." "Amanda, why are you calling me?" Because you're the only person I know who might help. I'm desperate, Robert. I'm about to be evicted. Have you tried calling one of those sophisticated, successful men your mother thought you deserved? Silence. "Amanda, 3 weeks before you dumped me, you told your parents I'd never amount to anything, that you needed someone who could match your social standing. Well, I'm still the same guy who never amounts to anything. What makes you think I'd have money to spare for someone as high class as you? Robert, please." "You know what, Amanda? I've got an idea. Why don't you call your Uncle Marcus? I'm sure a successful lawyer like him would be happy to help his favorite niece." "Oh, wait, I forgot. He's probably not returning your calls, since your father's conviction made the family name toxic. Robert, I'm begging you. And I'm saying no. You made your choice, Amanda. You chose to see me as a mark instead of a partner. You chose your family's greed over our relationship. You chose to throw away 4 years for the promise of something better. I made a mistake. Yes, you did. You mistook me for someone who'd be stupid enough to help you twice." I hung up and had my secretary block her number. That night, I took Jessica out to dinner at the nicest restaurant in town. We talked about her work saving animals, my latest construction projects, our plans for the weekend. Real conversation between two people who actually like each other. While we were eating, I happened to see a familiar figure through the window, Amanda walking past on the sidewalk, wearing a uniform from some cleaning service. She looked tired, defeated, older than her years. For just a moment, I felt something that might have been pity. Then I remembered Patricia's condescending laugh, David's patronizing tone, Amanda's cold calculation as she threw away 4 years of love for a better business opportunity. The pity disappeared. Jessica noticed me looking out the window. "Someone you know?" "Used to," I said. "Nobody important." And that's the truth. Amanda and her family had been important to me once, when I thought they were real people instead of predators in expensive clothes. But they'd shown me exactly what they were, and I'd responded accordingly. They wanted someone good enough for their standards. I hope they found him. Good luck affording him on $12 an hour. That's my story. 4 years of my life wasted on people who saw me as nothing but a paycheck. But at least I found out who they really were before I married into that family of grifters. Consider it an expensive education in human nature,